Thank you so much. And I'm just so thrilled. I have to say a big thank you to everyone from the Jewish Historical Society of Michigan and Katie and Barbara and everyone who made this possible. So I'm very thrilled to be here. I'm also so grateful to Danny Schnee and to Ruth Adler Schnee who are, joining us. So let's see, I wonder if I need to click on this got it thing. Yeah, let me do that. Sorry, because we're doing Zoom and because I'm actually on Zoom, I think that's why some of these things are popping up. See if I can move these things up here. Okay, great. All right, but we're glad that we can do the Zoom because otherwise we wouldn't be able to have Ruth with us from Colorado Springs. So I'm thrilled to share with you a little bit more about the life and legacy of Ruth Adler Schnee. I first met Ruth Adler Schnee in 2011, and I was working on this book about Alexander Gerard, who's an amazing mid-century designer. A couple of you are familiar with his work, best known as a textile designer, but also while he lived in Michigan, was active primarily as an architect. So I was asked to start researching a private home in Grosse Pointe of all places. That's this amazing modern home. It's actually on the cover of the book in the middle over there. And so I was trying to learn more about Gerard during his time in Michigan. And I talked to the archivist at Cranbrook, and she gave me Ruth Adler Schnee's number and said, she knew Gerard. So I started talking to her, and I had these wonderful conversations in Ruth's kitchen, and they just became more and more frequent and lasted longer and longer. And just one of the most cherished experiences of my life, getting to be have this friendship with Ruth, but along the way, learning about Alexander Gerard and all of the other design pioneers that she worked with at mid-century, including Charles and Ray Ames, Errol Saarinen, George Nelson, Buckminster Fuller, but of course, as she would refer to them as Yami, Bucky. It's like, how many people still refer to Buckminster Fuller as Bucky? I mean, she's probably one of the few that can get away with that. But at the beginning, I didn't know how much our lives and careers would intersect. So over the past 11 years, I've been privileged to serve not only as her close friend, but also as, I guess I would say, a witness to and documenter of this amazing life and design career. And in 2019, when Cranbrook did an exhibition of her life and work at the Cranbrook Art Museum, they asked me to contribute the biographical essay for the catalog. And that on the table over there on the right-hand side is the catalog from the exhibition. So if you are interested in Ruth Adler Schnee, I didn't ask, I can almost guarantee they have it in this library. You could probably check it out or buy it at the Cranbrook Art Museum. So I'm going to share a few slides, and on screen is a great photo of Ruth shot by Julie Pincus. That was actually shot for the book that you see that's standing up on the left, which is the 2015 Kresge Eminent Artist booklet that was produced when she was given that award. Let's see, sorry. I know this was happening. Let's see, gotta touch this. Come on. Okay, there we go. I just wanted to show a few slides. Ruth may remember some of these, some of our, I guess we would call them design dates, where I would pick her up. And this was just so much fun because as being this, design legend in Detroit, she would get invited to absolutely everything. And so I would come to her house, which is located not far from here, Telegraph and 12 Mile. I would go to her condo and pick her up. And we would drive everywhere. It was so much fun. So on the left is a view of Ruth with me and Lucia Atwood, who is the granddaughter of Charles and Ray Eames. So that was taken when we went to the opening of the World of Charles and Ray Eames exhibition at the Henry Ford. So that was really fun. This is are some images from my book launch. Ruth actually wrote the foreword to my book. So when we had the book launch at the DIA, she was there reading the foreword and doing her least favorite thing, which is signing copies of books. So that part she didn't appreciate too much, but we had a lot of fun doing This is the opening of that Ruth Adler Schnee exhibition at Cranbrook in December of 2019. It was kind of funny, at the Charles and Ray Eames opening. We were walking around and we met the director of the Cranbrook Art Museum, Andrew Blauvelt. And at that point, he was still relatively new. And Ruth came right up to him and said, you know, why haven't you done an exhibition of my work yet? And he said, well, you know, that's a good thing you mentioned it. We're really interested in that. So the very next day, I was walking out of the parking garage into the stadium for my son's graduation from Michigan State University. And Ruth called me and she said, who was that we talked to last night about my exhibition? And I said, gave a name and what's his number, and gave the number, and she called him right back and said, when are we doing the exhibition? And they did. They followed through. And thankfully, all of this happened pre-pandemic. This was December of 2019. And you can see some great photos of Ruth at left with her work, at center with Andrew Blauvelt, the director of the Cranbrook Art Museum, and at right with me and with Ronit Eisenbach, an architect that we'll reference a little bit later, but one of her close friends. So in terms of recommended reading, definitely the exhibition catalog, definitely the Kresge Eminent Artist book. And then there's another book that's on the table that I can show people at the end. It's an exhibition that was curated by Ronit Eisenbach in part. And then there's a film, The Radiant Sun. And I know that they have that here at the library if you want to hear about her life and a lot of good like audio of Ruth speaking. That's an excellent one to rent. So I'm going to, for the next hour or so, you know, it's kind of a tall order when you hear everything that encompasses her life. I'm going to give kind of an overview of her life. But I had the idea when I was writing the essay, you know, her life is so interrelated with her textiles that I would choose textiles for 3 different periods of her career. And that's what I ended up doing. The first one, though, that I really love is this one, threads. And it's a little bit hard to see, it's getting cut off a little bit, but these continuous strands are like the yarns I use in needlework and the course of one's life as it is bent, spliced, looped, entangled, or interrupted by fate. This design is symbolic of my own search to find my own vision in a process that can be chaotic, conflicting, and sometimes inspiring. And isn't life like that, right? But this is one of my favorite textiles, and you can see the interspersed threads. And then you can see that this particular textile was done in several different colorways. So that kind of inspired me to look for other textiles that would be reflective of her life. So I have 3 different periods and 3 different textiles. The first one is threads, which was actually done later in her career when she started working with a company called Anzia. That was done in 1995. Germination, which was done in 1948. And My Neighborhood, which was also one of those ones that was done for Anzia in the late 90s. So let's start off with the early part of her career and with threads. Threads reminds me of a favorite story that Ruth often tells about an argument that she had with her mother when she was 5 years old. A story which demonstrates both her precocious artistic awareness and her relentless quest for the new. I mean, how many people of us remember a specific argument we had when we were 5, and especially like this? So at the time, the Adlers lived in an apartment in Frankfurt, Germany, and young Ruth objected to the eclectic nature of the family's home decor. She recalls, quote, "I could never understand how my mother, who was a Bauhaus graduate, could have old-fashioned Biedermeier furniture mixed with modern pieces." With a smile, she recalls her mother's response. "When you get older, you will appreciate that one mixes the old with the new. As long as it's well designed, it is like a beautiful bouquet of flowers." In a 2002 interview conducted by her daughter Anita, Ruth referenced the lesson as, quote, "the thread in my life," a metaphor which of course inspired that 1995 textile. And I might argue that Ruth's life story is, in a way, like a tapestry composed of these different interwoven threads, whether they are people, experiences, or guiding principles, and all of which shaped her unique personal and artistic vision. And of course, growing up in Germany, Ruth absorbed the intellectual, artistic, and musical interests of her family and their circle of friends. Joseph Adler's family had run an antiquarian bookstore in Frankfurt, and what we see on the left over here. And he worked very closely with his wife in running this bookstore, and they carried pretty much everything you could imagine. So in a way, looking back later in her career, she never really knew them or remembered the bookstore, but it seems to me like kind of a precursor to the Adler Schnee store in many ways. So Marie Solomon Adler, her mother, had studied at the Bauhaus. So she had all of these kind of intellectual and artistic things like in her blood. Her upbringing, first in Frankfurt and then in Dusseldorf, offered similarly unique childhood experiences, such as the opportunity to design her own clothes. So on the right-hand side slide, this image is a group of women from the Bauhaus, and I believe her mother is one of them. It's a little bit cut off there. But over here on the ground, this is Ruth, and you can see this smock dress. She actually designed it. So she would tell her mother like what she wanted for her clothes, and then she would have it made like in Paris. So she actually designed her own clothes from an early age. She also designed this coat. And when I spoke with her about this a couple of years ago, she remembered vividly this coat that she had designed. And this is wonderful. This is like a drawing that she did. I think this was kind of a continuing saga of the Swinigal family. And you can see the curtains and the beds and all the different things. So this is kind of an early experience in designing little mini environments. On the right is an artwork by Paul Klee that Ruth had in her home. And this is just another example. She would say that Paul Klee was my babysitter, you know, so I mean, wow. So these were early experiences that really impacted her love of color. Of course, not all of these early experiences were good, and coming from a family of German Jews, Ruth had a front seat for some of the 20th century's most horrific events, including the rise of Hitler and the ensuing Holocaust. She actually attended, believe it or not, on the left is a poster from the Degenerate Art Exhibition of 1937. And of course, the art that was considered degenerate by Hitler was incredibly inspiring for Ruth. And she really wanted to attend the exhibition. Her parents were afraid that, you know, they were taking names and they were watching who was going in the exhibition. And they said, here, wear this hat. And she wore like a hat and kind of pushed it over her face. And she went into the exhibition, which was pretty bold. Ruth also has vivid memories of Kristallnacht, when her family's possessions were smashed. The family was warned in advance, you know, to get out of the house, and they got out of the house, and when they came back, you know, a lot of their beautiful furniture had been thrown into the street and smashed and that sort of thing. And including this drawing that Ruth still has. It's a drawing by Paul Signac, and it was torn into pieces, and they had it restored. And saved it, and she still has it today. Her father was also taken to the Dachau concentration camp, and this was early in the Holocaust. And her mother, I mean, just incredibly heroic, he worked for ThyssenKrupp, and went to the company and said, do you know that they've taken him, and worked through the company to get him back from the camp. And Danny, who's also on the Zoom, has told me before that he had asked his grandfather many times about his experiences in the camp, and he never would share it. It was just too devastating. But he did write down his experiences, and after he passed away, they discovered a letter, and he was able to read about the experiences. But that's how devastating it was. But I mean, the bravery of her mother to stand up to the Nazis and demand, that he be returned. And for him to be returned was just amazing. She not only got their father back from the camp, but arranged to have their belongings repaired, because I think there was something that if they weren't repaired, you couldn't take things with you, and secured visas for the family's 1939 immigration to America. And that was not easy either. So the spirit of perseverance in the face of crisis would inspire Ruth to face challenges later in life. So despite the family's struggles, they always envisioned a brighter future. In fact, in her journal that Ruth wrote on the way to America, she called New York City, where they were going to land, a long dream. And she also called it a land of mechanism, but a long dream that had finally become a reality. And in the upper right-hand corner is a photo of a book, which is the actual journal that Ruth wrote in during that voyage across the ocean. And that is in the Cranbrook Center for Collections. So I had the opportunity to see the actual book, but you can actually read the book online. Cranbrook Center for Collections has done an amazing job with the Edward and Ruth Adler Schnee papers. And a lot of the papers are online. In fact, the entire text of that journal is online. You can view it online. When they arrived, it was not easy and they struggled financially. But Joseph and Marie Adler made sure that their children excelled academically in order to achieve their own American dreams. And on the left is an article from the newspaper that shows some of the things that they did to make money. And remember, Marie Adler was an accomplished artist. She pressed flowers and made these lampshades, which I wish I would have one of those lampshades today. And they sold them, so they did whatever they could to make money. Ruth ended up going to Cass Tech High School in Detroit, which probably everyone is familiar with, and a lot of famous people from a variety of different fields came from Cass Tech. And at that time, they had a program in costume design. And actually, I know someone who graduated, if you're familiar with the muralist Hubert Massey, his daughter went to Cass Tech. And at the time, they didn't have that costume design or fashion design anymore, and they were just bringing it back. And a great organization called Design Corps Detroit that does a wonderful design festival, Month of Design, every September. They worked with Gucci, and there's a great program called Gucci Changemakers, and they're very active in Detroit. And I believe they gave the Cass Tech Design Fashion Design Club like a amount of money to like restart and to encourage these young fashion designers in Detroit. So in fact, so these are some of the designs that Ruth did. It's just a picture of Detroit at the time. It's funny because, and I'm sure a lot of people in this room would remember, but when I go elsewhere to lecture, people will ask me, well, why did Alexander Girard moved from New York to Detroit in 1939? And I tell them, like, well, who didn't want to be in Detroit in 1939? It was like one of the largest cities in America and thriving in terms of the arts and economy and that sort of thing. So this was a great place for her to be, to do her studies. On the upper right are some of the design drawings that Ruth did at Cass Tech that she actually used to apply to RISD, the Rhode Island School of Design. And she was accepted. In this new creatively charged phase of her life, Ruth looked outside of her family circle for new threads. And this new period I'm illustrating with this textile entitled Germination. And it's at this time, kind of this next phase, where she's really cultivating her artistic vision and also her network. So starting with her enrollment at RISD in the fall of 1942, Ruth encountered new artistic and educational mentors and new design philosophies, which allowed her to cultivate her own artistic vision, but also create a reservoir of personal and professional support for her future design career, which she definitely would need. She transferred at RISD from costume design program program to interior design and architecture. At the time, however, architectural offices were not hiring Jewish applicants and were not hiring women. So this demonstrates two key facts about Ruth. One, her interest in the integration of the arts. So I think she felt better that interior design and architecture would better fulfill that kind of interest. And that was, of course, inspired by the Bauhaus experiences of her mother. But it also demonstrates her stubborn refusal to follow the easy path, choosing instead to forge her own path. And she got a really solid kind of more the Beaux-Arts type education, very different from what she would later have at Cranbrook, with influential instructors such as sculptor and calligrapher John Howard Benson. And his mantra was, design is all around. You don't have to go far, just look. And that would really remain one of the central tenets in Ruth's life. The year 1945 was critical in the evolution of Ruth's career, beginning with her graduation in May from RISD. On June 8th, 1945, she received a letter saying that she had won honorable mention in the Condé Nast Prix de Paris competition, which offered winners career-related positions in New York City. Normally, it would have been Paris, but of course, Paris was out of the question as it was wartime. So she was placed in the antiques department of the Lord and Taylor's department store in New York City. So you can imagine, I know I see a couple of people thinking antiques department. So she rejected the opportunity after just 2 days. And that took a lot of guts too, right? Saying it was really not my métier.
Love that.
Her bold move paid off. They could have said, well, go home, you know, but Condé Nast set up an alternate interview for Ruth in the offices of Raymond Loewy, who we see at center, who was known for designing iconic corporate logos for Shell Oil, Coca-Cola, and Lucky Strike corporations. She had an interview in which she was seated at a drafting table and basically told, show me what you can do. So how intimidating would that be? But she landed her dream job as an assistant designer. In a postcard dated July 11th, 1945, Ruth wrote to her parents, I am so happy I could squeak. Let's see. I have learned more in the past 2 days than I learned in 2 years at RISD. She also states, I am amazed by my ability. I have gone so modern. So I think that's just so fun. And this is a great clipping that she sent to her parents. It says, this is a view of the modern efficient drafting room at Raymond Loewy Associates. And she's written like in her characteristic handwriting, Ruth Adler sits here right at the window overlooking Fifth Avenue. And she has a little arrow towards this desk. So I think that's so great. Surprisingly undaunted by her status as the lone woman in the office among 50 male architects, Ruth excelled, forging lifelong personal and professional connections with colleagues Minoru Yamasaki and Warren Platner, and all three of them would end up in Detroit later. Toward the end of the summer of 1945, Ruth received a one-year fellowship, the first given to a Jewish woman, in the architectural design MFA program at Cranbrook Art Academy. She was not eager to accept. In fact, at the time she stated, wild horses could not drag me from New York City to Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. However, armed with assurances from Raymond Loewy that she could return, and with the one-way train ticket purchased by her parents, Ruth set off for Cranbrook. So here's a great image of Cranbrook at Ruth, the way she looked at the time, and one of these great letters. And again, it's so sad that we don't write letters anymore because, you know, who's saving all these text messages and, you know, emails and things like that. I think we should make a push to start writing letters again because it's just such a wonderful treasure trove. The Cranbrook curriculum was centered on Eliel Saarinen's belief that art and design cannot be taught, it must be learned. So it was really the polar opposite of the Beaux-Arts training she had received at RISD. She recalls, it was very difficult at first. I was not prepared for it. There was no direction. I was deposited into a studio and told, create. But after a few months, she came to embrace the Cranbrook design philosophy, recalling, quote, once I realized that there were no limitations except those posed by myself, I produced. It was the most exhilarating experience to watch my work unfold day to day. She credits Eliel Saarinen with instilling in her the discipline, energy, and stamina required to achieve perfection in design. She had some really fun memories on the left, and many of you have probably been here. This is Saarinen House on the Cranbrook campus, and this was designed by Eliel Saarinen for his to be his family's home, and then it later became the family of every president of the Art Academy, and it's currently a museum. I don't recall whether anyone's living there now, but she recalls that they would, instead of having a seminar per se or a lecture, they would invite the graduate students to their home and they would sit and talk about design. And she said that Loya would be sitting on a hard bench, probably this hard bench right here that has her tapestries on it. Eliel sat on a ceremonial chair where he always said he was exceedingly comfy, and we students lounged at their feet. She says, there I learned the philosophy which has governed my entire life, and one that would make my life so very difficult, but very rewarding. Reading Ruth's MFA thesis completed in advance of her May 1946 graduation, it is clear that she was ready to take on the next challenge of her professional career. In the thesis, she states, the new is now. There is no reason to fight for the acknowledgement of contemporary design. Fight to bring the future design into the contemporary background. Little did she know that fight would be her life's work. I just want to point out in the upper right, this is a photo that I took of Ruth when she came back to Detroit from Colorado Springs, where she has moved. She came back for the opening of the Cranbrook exhibition, and they took her into the archives and they showed her her diploma. So I love that photo. Her career took a momentous turn after her graduation from Cranbrook in May of 1946. Inspired by Eliel Saarinen, she entered the Chicago Tribune Better Homes for Better Living competition, which sought fresh and interesting ideas for post-war home decor. On April 12, 1947, she received this telegram telling her that she had won a $100 prize, which was a lot of money back then, and better yet, publicity for her design, which is a modern, I guess you would say, Miesian style house with glass walls, but textiles covering the glass. And she pretty much kind of designed the textiles for her house on her own because there was nothing for her to reference. There was nothing on the market, right? Everything was, she always says, cabbage roses. And so after her winning entry was published, she got a call from an architectural firm that said that they were looking for modern style and large scale window coverings for automotive showrooms. And Ruth kind of said, like, these are in my imagination, they're not on the market, like they don't exist. And they said, that's okay, we'll give you money, so that you can produce them. And so probably most people would say, I can't do that. And she hadn't even really studied textile design at Cranbrook, but she set about learning how to be a textile designer. And at that time, silkscreen printing had been done primarily on paper and not on cloth, and certainly not in bold colors and abstract shapes, because all of the modern architects, if you think of Mies van der Rohe and all of those, especially the ones from Europe, Ruth would always say their favorite colors were black and gray. I mean, they didn't have any bold, bright colors. So she set about solving her problem. She found a studio at 9842 12th Street in Detroit and commissioned a 30-foot table with screens for printing. She discovered a perfect medium tailor's canvas, which was a mohair and cotton blend that was cheap and available, but also durable and absorbed the dyes without obscuring the texture of the fabric. So she had to come up with all of this, right? She then set about teaching herself the silkscreen process. Stating later, nobody taught us how to do it. We just had to pick it up and learn it. And here's a great photo of Ruth with slits and slats, which is one of the early textiles that she did. So before long, 3 designs had been produced: slits and slats, pits and pods, and slinky shadows. Ruth Adler was in the textile business. However, while the aforementioned educational, personal, and professional experiences had laid the framework for her design career, she needed a partner in order to fully cultivate her artistic vision and share it with a wider audience. Therefore, it is fitting that Ruth's earliest memory of Eddie Schnee involves textiles. Eddie had come to Sunday dinner at the Adler home as a guest of a family friend during late summer in 1947. When Ruth brought out her textile design pits and pods, which is the one on the left, she recalls that Eddie absolutely flipped, saying, quote, "That's what I want for my room." In keeping with Ruth's entrepreneurial spirit, she made Eddie pay full retail price for the fabric, even though he did the screen printing himself. He probably had to learn how to screen print. And so while many young suitors would have been deterred, Eddie, a Yale University graduate in economics, was impressed, saying later, "That made me see what a good business person she is." The couple married on May 23rd, 1948, and a unique personal and professional partnership was born, one that is perfectly encapsulated in this textile entitled Germination from 1948. Germination was conceived during Ruth and Eddie's honeymoon trip to Arizona and Colorado. Ruth explains, "I had never seen the West. It was a life-changing experience to view the red layers of soil against the vast blue western sky. The biomorphic shapes between the horizontal stratified earth forms became seed pods." Eddie named the design. So you can see just how she translated her personal experiences in these natural forms into these abstract compositions. As Ruth recalls, Eddie named all of her designs even before they came off the drawing board, and even helped with the silk screening. And I love some of the names: swizzles, loopholes, fish and chips, Fission. So really fun names that he came up with. But Eddie, more importantly, served as Ruth's aesthetic advisor and sounding board. And in fact, I'm showing you 2 textiles on screen. At left, we see Eddie at work doing the silk screening, so he was fully involved. At center is Germination, and at right is Strata, which is a derivation, further evolution of Germination. And it was Eddie, supposedly, who said, "Leave out those little seed pods and concentrate on the horizontal lines." And that new design was called Strata. And Strata won the International Celanese Corporation Prize in 1950, which helped to launch Ruth into the national spotlight, and ushered in a new role for Eddie as the public face of the couple's budding retail business. If you read the essay by Susan Brown in the Ruth Adler Schnee exhibition catalog, she states that by 1950, Ruth's studio employed 2 printers and provided 75 yards of fabric per day. These included Strata, but also custom orders such as Strata Echo, which is the one in the middle, which was a 2-color variation of Strata customized for architect and friend Louis Redstone. The following decades would witness the growth and evolution not only of Ruth's design career, but also of the Adler Schnee partnership, manifested concretely in the Adler Schnee retail store in Detroit, Michigan. And I would say thematically in Ruth's textile design, My Neighborhood, which is the one that's on screen. And really throughout its 28-year run, Adler Schnee maintained a dual mission to promote the best in modern design, but also to foster a vibrant community culture in Detroit. And this is a great quote. It's a little bit cut off, but today when faceless plastic shopping centers march across the face of America, come to Harmony Park in the heart of the city and meet some real people. The shopkeepers who surround this cozy little park are bright, vivacious, determined people here to make this city blossom. And of course, he was referring to Ruth and himself. And I actually posted some information about this lecture and about the Ruth Adler Schnee store on a great Facebook site that has to do with Detroit historic architecture. And I got so many comments back from people. I have some of them listed at the end, but so many people talked about the store and about the role that it played in their lives and how much time they spent there. Maybe didn't spend as much as the Schnees would have liked, but love to look. Ruth recalls that Eddie had decorated the back wall of their first showroom, and this is the one we see at left, located on 12th Street in Detroit with Strata wallpaper. They also spent their savings to stock a wide variety of housewares and home furnishings, including white Rosenthal china and Eames plywood chairs. And I've been at lectures before when people will ask Ruth, you know, I found this Eames storage unit and I'm wondering if I should buy it. And she will always say, you should have bought it from our store. Early customers were few but dedicated. In fact, due to financial constraints, some even purchased modern merchandise from drawings on the studio wall because they didn't have money to get the catalogs. Most importantly, the store showcased the couple's symbiotic division of labor. Ruth, the designer working behind the scenes, and Eddie, the Yale University economist running the retail business. So this was a big thing for him, having received this economics degree and using it, you know, to run this retail store and really be the person to keep the business afloat. Many people who visited the store recall that he spent hours on the sales floor explaining the simplicity of modern design to anyone who came in to listen. And I'm so jealous of the people who got to spend time there because I missed it. It was already, you know, I had already closed by the time I was aware. The magic of his salesmanship included displaying the Bauhaus-inspired Jena glass teapot on a pure white marble cube like a piece of sculpture. The store got a boost in sales in September of 1949 with the opening of For Modern Living, a groundbreaking exhibition at the Detroit Institute of Art. And this exhibition was conceived by mid-century master Alexander Gerard, but was all Minoru Yamasaki and Eero Saarinen were also on the executive committee who kind of came up with the concept for the exhibition. And the whole idea was to showcase modern design for the home in a variety of different ways. Here we see the exterior of the museum during the exhibition. Here we see an area which had showcased textiles, and Ruth Adler Schnee's Ship Shape was one of these textiles. Here is the exhibition catalog. You can still find this on eBay if you're lucky, but it's a little bit hard to find now. But really the culmination of this exhibition, which just fascinates me, is this area. And you may not recognize this space. This is the Great Hall from the Detroit Institute of Art. So the one with all the armor and the classical architecture, they basically camouflaged it and planted live trees and set up these ramps. And these ramps led to all these different rooms that were designed by the greatest modern designers of the time, Charles and Ray Eames, George Nelson, Florence Knoll, etc. And this is the Florence Knoll room here. And it was really designed to let Detroiters see that modern design could really work for them at home and how functional and practical it would be. Really, this was done in the aftermath of World War II. And so it was part of this utopian vision to teach people that we've done all this technology and it's been used for war, right? So let's take all of this technology and let's use it for the betterment of mankind. And so that was the whole concept behind the exhibition. And a lot of the designers were frustrated living in Detroit, seeing a lot of the cutting edge designers, who are creating these cutting edge cars, living in these period homes and using this traditional revival styles. As Gerard would say, you don't wear a hoop skirt, right? So why are you, using period furniture? Why aren't you designing or living and using modern furniture? In fact, just before I forget, if anyone is interested, I have them all listed here on this little card. I'm doing a lecture on the For Modern Living exhibition in December at the Ford House in Grosse Pointe. Significantly, the exhibition was sponsored by Detroit department store J.L. Hudson's, which was not known for its modern merchandise. As Ruth explains, fortunately for us, Hudson's didn't educate its sales personnel in modern design. So I think what would happen is people went to the exhibition, they saw it was sponsored by Hudson's, and they went to Hudson's and said, I want to have a sofa in that burlap that I saw in the exhibition. And then they would say, I don't know what you're talking about, go to Adler Schnee, and Ruth would educate them and say, it's Belgian linen, it's not. And then they decided, Ruth and Eddie, if these people want to buy modern furnishings, why don't we supply them? And that was really the birth of the retail store. Inspired by the new business, Adler Schnee moved into a new, larger space on 7403 Puritan Avenue in Detroit, one with more shop windows to display its wares. Adler Schnee continued to print textiles designed by Ruth, including draperies for Winkleman's department store, which was led by store executives and friends, Ben and Edna Goldstein, and for the offices and auditorium of the Ford Rotunda. They got this big commission to do these textiles for the Ford Rotunda, and they were having a hard time coming up with a design. And Ruth recalls, Eddie said, you know what, why don't we just do, like in this graphic, script, like Ford. And they pitched it to Ford, and that was, she said, was the easiest pitch they ever made. They loved it. So what happened was, when it came back, the textile was sent and came back, they realized that the Ford was upside down, and they're like, we're going to be ruined. Number one, they didn't notice right away. Number two, you may recall what happened to the Ford Rotunda. It burned down, and that literally saved them a ton of money, because they would have probably at some point had to redo that entire thing. So I'm not saying they were happy that the Ford Rotunda burned down, but it was a little bit of a relief for that huge, gigantic textile that they would have had to redo. Let's see. Ruth's work received considerable critical acclaim at the time, even garnering inclusion in a November 1st, 1954 magazine article, Mathematics by the Yard, which showcased textiles by contemporary designers like Ruth Adler Schnee and Alexander Gerard. And in fact, that this image from that time, Life magazine, was the inspiration for many of you who went to the exhibition at Cranbrook. That was the inspiration for it. Let's see. Yeah, significantly, the image, in 1958, Ruth won the coveted Good Design Award by the Museum of Modern Art, but sadly, this did not help sales. While corporations like Ford and aesthetically adventurous clients like the Goldsteins embraced modern styling, most Detroiters still favored traditional fabrics and furnishings, including modernist architects like Yamasaki often hired Ruth to do the interiors of his homes, but he favored more minimalistic and monochromatic designs. Ruth recalls it was not a rose garden. Things looked even more bleak in 1954 after a fire burned the store and all of its merchandise. In the aftermath of the devastation, Ruth and Eddie traveled to California to visit the Santa Monica home of their friends, Charles and Ray Eames. And Ruth recalls that Eddie told the Eameses, like, we love what we're doing, but no one is interested. No one wants to buy it. And Charles Eames evidently said, don't worry, if it's well designed, it will sell. And she always laughs and says, no one told us it would take 50 years. So this California visit solidified their resolve to persevere in the face of adversity, a courage which was rooted, I believe, in Ruth's early family history in Germany, but also in her Cranbrook training. She recalls, we supported each other. We were pretty much used to the rejection of modernism, and it didn't deter us. We were totally committed to our dream. Next, they moved to a third site at 1605 Livernois Avenue, a street then known as the Avenue of Fashion. And the site was a good one because it was located across the street from the U of D Architecture School and facilitated connections with Detroit architects. And at this time, Ruth's primary focus shifted from textile design to interior architecture and space planning projects. She did corporate commissions such as Winkleman's and Kern's department stores, but she also did interior commissions from architects Minoru Yamasaki, James Kahn, and Louis Redstone. And on the right is one of the interiors she did for the Rosenthal residence. Here's one of the really creative advertisements that they had. We'll see even more creative advertisements when they move into the Harmony Park store. So you'll see she's really going back to that Bauhaus and Cranbrook roots and really designing everything on the interior. And our clients loved her. I mean, honestly, when she was still living in Michigan just a few years ago, Eli and Edie Brode were still asking her to, you know, design their Florida home and this and that. I mean, so her clients were absolutely dedicated. This move to interior space planning was inspired by the increasing demands that Ruth faced working, running a store, and raising a family, which by then included Anita, born in 1949, Jeremy, born in 1951, and Danny, born in 1954. However, Ruth was aided by Eddie, who demonstrated a level of domestic involvement that was rare at the time. And he pretty much took care of the children, and he didn't critique the fact that she didn't cook, saying, "I didn't marry you for that." The three children remember taking part in events at the store, and I know Danny says he remembers dishing out ice cream from a truck parked in front of the Livernois store. All right, so here's, I think this was meant to illustrate the point that I just made about that kind of integration of design. I'm just showing you as another example. This is another view of Saarinen House, right? Where we have the rugs and the table and the ceiling and everything all coordinates. And she very much was in keeping with that aesthetic, that kind of total work of art. This is the floor plan of that house that she designed for the Chicago Tribune competition back during your time at Cranbrook. Okay. In her new designs for residential interiors, Ruth brought these concepts of good modern design to concrete reality. She created, in her own words, an aesthetic unity, not only of pattern, color, and texture, but also of space and light. As Gabe Wilson writes in his catalog essay from the exhibition, Ruth's interior design work brought good design into everyday homes and lives. One thing that's really important, though, is that she never let her own vision or that of the architect compromise the functional and aesthetic needs of the client. Ruth famously stood up to Yamasaki, who was a friend, but not in when they were doing business, right? When he challenged the colorful, comfortable interiors that she had conceived for the Goldstein house. Ruth recalls that he preferred a minimalist modernist aesthetic and critiqued her work severely and in front of the client. But she refused to back down, and she won out because the Goldsteins were on her side. So that's significant right there. Beginning in September of 1964, Ruth and Eddie's efforts were focused on a new venture, the fourth iteration of the retail store dubbed Adler Schnee on Harmony Park. The decision to move their store from its previous location in Northwest Detroit to the downtown area was shocking at the time because most businesses were moving out of the city and they were moving into the city. But they really believed that they had a mission and that the store could be not only a commercial venture, but a stimulating force in the downtown area. And there's a really fun story that I came across in the archives. So this building, the Hemeter building, had been built, I believe, in the 30s. I don't remember the exact date, but as a cigar factory. But by this time, it was owned by J.L. Hudson's. And so Ruth had her eye on this building and she really wanted to use this for the store. And it was right on Harmony Park. It was a perfect site. And they didn't have the money for it. And they didn't have the money to renovate it. So evidently Eddie went to Hudson's and said, he made this pitch to them that, you know, we could be this great, you know, combination. We could be like David and Goliath. And obviously, you know, the Hudson's is Goliath and they would be David. And in the end, Hudson sold them for a good price, and they even renovated the interior of the building for them to use in the store. So that's pretty significant. So these are just some of the fun, you know, we're rolling out the red carpet. Come join the celebration. Come see our modern general store, a touch of Paris and dynamic downtown Detroit. Raise a glass of bubbly to a bright future for us all. Ruth and Ed Schnee. Isn't that great? So just wonderful energy and enthusiasm for downtown. Reminiscent of Marie Adler's old and new adage from the beginning of the lecture, the Adler Schnee store merged old world architectural charm with an avant-garde aesthetic sensibility. Former customers describe the store's magical atmosphere marked by explosions of color in the Copco enamelware and Marimekko women's fashions, cultural surprises in the biomorphic furniture of Finnish designer Alvar Aalto, and in the folk art that they purchased on buying trips to Mexico and South America. Eddie promoted this eclectic multicultural mix of merchandise, not available anywhere else in Detroit, through witty ads, one urging customers to steal it in reference to Swedish stainless steel flatware, and another iconic ad showing Eddie, and this is Eddie on the right, wearing a Noguchi paper lantern. I didn't realize that was Eddie until I think Ruth told me that. But look at this, Danish stackers, like just fun. And this is a crazy fun advertisement. While the couple's initial focus was on the store and its merchandise, Eddie and Ruth soon turned their attention outwards, organizing community events intended both to bring people into the store, but to also expand the store outwards into the surrounding community. They had outdoor barbecue events on Japanese Kamado grills. They served coffee. I mean, things that stores do all the time now, right? But nobody was doing that at the time. They even organized an annual Harmony Park Art Fair, and they revitalized Monroe Street in Greektown. These are some of the designs that she did to make the street kind of more aesthetically unified. And I believe that Detroit Edison was doing new lanterns for the streets and things like that. And they were actually given the keys to the city for these efforts. The concept today is known as placemaking, but Ruth and Eddie were already doing it back in the 60s. Significantly, Adler Schnee stayed open even after the devastating events of the summer of '67, not closing its doors until 1977. After that, Ruth and Eddie continued their design business under the name Schnee and Schnee Consultants until Eddie passed away in 2000. While the retail chapter of Ruth's career and her partnership with Eddie had ended, Ruth would both discover new threads and revisit old ones during the next primarily independent phase of her career. These encompassed commercial partnerships, awards, exhibitions, scholarly recognition, and preservation and restoration. And I would say that Ruth's drawing on the left, just absolutely gorgeous drawing threads, which is a study for that 1995 textile, illustrates the continuing interplay between old and new in the last 2 decades of Ruth's life and career. So let's start off with the old part, right? So the drawing on the left, which is a drawing for the textile threads, was created in 1993 when Ruth was 70. So just absolutely stunning. But it was done using the same architectural tools, the pencil, the T-square, and the triangle that she had been trained to use from her earliest career. And so she's using the tools of the architect, and she's using the same tools. And these are some great photos also shot by Julie Pincus for that Kresge Eminent Artist catalog. And I just think it's wonderful to show her at work. Here's a great example of how she's working in 2D, but remember, she has to think in 3D because a textile moves and you have to think of how that textile is going to be seen in 3D. So these are just examples of Strings and Things, which was designed in 1954 and then reissued by Anzia in the 90s. But you can see it flat and then you can see it in movement. So how does she get the ideas for her designs? Recalling the words of her favorite professor, Benson, everywhere. In nature, cityscapes, snowflakes, even in my sewing basket. And here's a great quote. Here's the John Howard Benson quote, design is all around. You don't have to go far, just look. The Ruth Adler Schnee quote below, everything around us is a design, everything. A flower, a leaf, a stone, whatever it is. And I think it's such a great lesson. I really feel sad that she didn't get a chance to do more work in her later years with children because they need to hear that. Get off of your screen and just go outside and look around and you'll be amazed at what you find. However, while Ruth is happy that others find joy in her designs, because really when you look at her in her designs, here's nature inspired her. On the left is cordwood. This is wood leaves. Cityscapes inspired her. This is her 1950 design construction. And this is threads. So a lot of people will say, looking at your work, it makes me feel happy. And she'll say, not so much for me. She says, well, she's happy that others find joy in her designs. She describes her own creative process then and now as excruciating. She explains, the blank sheet of paper is daunting. The process of creating a new design can take as long as 2 years. When asked how she knows a design is complete, she responds, I can't put it into words. It sings to me. This time-tested process may explain the seemingly timeless appeal of Ruth's work, viewed back in the 50s as cutting edge, but now considered classic. She asserts, quote, I believe that good design is the art of problem solving. One has to create an aesthetic unity of pattern, color, and texture, and to address human needs. If that has been accomplished, it will never go out of style. Well, she uses still to this day these kind of old or traditional methods to create works like threads. The commission derived from a new commercial partnership with Anzia Textiles. This all began in 1993 when Mitzi Mills of Anzia approached Ruth and wanted to reissue some of her archival textile designs. And Ruth responded, you can't do that. Those designs never sold. And if I'm going to work with you, I would like to create new designs that will sell. So she agreed. So at the age of 70, and after a 30-year hiatus in textile design, Ruth Adler Schnee was back in the textile business. Her new work for Anzia included threads, as we know, but also bells, birds afar, birds of flight, and pipe dreams. So still some of those fun names, right? On the right is Bells of 1995, which won the Museum of Modern Art's Good Design Award, the same award that she had won back in 1958. So you know you're doing something well when the MoMA recognizes you. Buoyed by this success, Ruth agreed to let Anzia reissue several of her old or archival designs, including slits and slats and wireworks. However, there was a new approach involved, both technical and conceptual, as the archival designs needed to be translated from a printed to a woven textile medium. So that was like, again, you have to, your brain has to think differently, right? You know, when something is printed versus woven, something is flat versus 2D, et cetera. So on the left is Wireworks, which is a really amazing textile design. This is a detail of it. It's not so clear, but this is a full size. This was inspired by a visit she had taken during her RISD days to Alexander Calder's workshop. She would reissue more textiles for Anzia, but also for Knoll. And this is Strada. So remember Strada back from her early days, they wanted to reissue it, but they wanted to reuse it for hospital curtains, privacy curtains. So I'm not anxious to be going to the hospital anytime soon, but if I do, I would love to see these curtains. It would make me very happy. You can see though that they reoriented it, right? Instead of being that horizontal, remember Strada is derived from germination, which was derived from the landscape of the West, but they took it into a vertical orientation. But I just love the color schemes there too. So that's Knoll Textiles. Ruth's return to textile design in the 1990s corresponded with the rediscovery of her work by museum curators and a more general resurgence of interest in mid-century design. But the most comprehensive rediscovery of Ruth's work came in 2009 when architect Ronit Eisenbach, filmmaker Terry Saris, and graphic designer Hannah Smotrick joined forces to put together an exhibition called Ruth Adler Schnee, A Passion for Color. Yeah, low battery. Oh my gosh, thank you. I have my, wow, that's crazy. I'm gonna plug that in right now. Thank you. I want to lose my computer. Wow. There we go. That is not a good thing. I had that plugged in right up until the time of our thing. There we go. All right. Thank you. Good job. We don't want to run out of power at the last minute. Yeah, so they put together this amazing exhibition, and up until this time, Ruth's name was not as well known. And these were women designers who were saying, here's this pioneering woman designer, and her name is not as well known as, like, you know, Minoru Yamasaki and Charles Eames, and, you know, the same we could say for Ray Eames did not get as much credit as Charles Eames. So they really made a point of putting together this exhibition that was first at the University of Maryland and then at the Palazzo Mocenigo in Venice. And so they put together the catalog, not the eminent artists, but the other catalog that's over on the table. And they are the ones who also put together the film that I mentioned before, The Radiant Sun. All right. In 2013, Cranbrook Symposium, Michigan Modern Design That Shaped America, also celebrated Ruth Adler Schnee as one of the, really the sole survivor among the pioneers of modern design in Michigan. Indeed, while many designers leave a legacy through their work, Ruth is unique in that her life story, encompassing the stories of the Holocaust, the immigrant experience in America, the birth of modernism, and the fall and rise of Detroit, is equally inspirational. And she, unlike the others, is still around to tell it. Today, at the age of 99, Ruth is still relevant and in demand for interviews, articles, and exhibitions, and the awards keep coming. In 2015, she was named a Kresge Eminent Artist, an award honoring lifelong achievements in the arts community and life of Detroit. So I have been asked, what is her legacy? And in fact, in doing this lecture, I looked up the word legacy, and it says, came up with the following relevant definitions: a gift or bequest, something transmitted by or received from a predecessor. So keeping this in mind, I came up with 3 aspects of Ruth's career and life that could be considered a gift to future generations. 1, her body of design work. 2, her role as a woman designer. And 3, her status as a witness to history, both within and beyond Detroit. So let's reflect just for a moment. This is kind of the conclusion here. Her role as a woman designer. She had to triumph over the discriminatory practices that often subverted the contributions of women designers at the time. And like Georgia O'Keeffe, she refused that kind of be pigeonholed as a woman designer. She once stated, "I am not a believer that women can't break the glass ceiling. If women do a good job and are talented, they will get ahead. Chauvinism has never stopped me." She's led by example, undaunted as the lone woman in Raymond Loewy's office, the first Jewish woman in the architectural design program at Cranbrook. And she really started her own uncharted path, designing award-winning textiles and imaginative and functional spaces for the greatest architects, some would say, in Detroit. She has become a role model for future generations, including friend Ronit Eisenbach, who's the one who started that exhibition, and often uses in her classes Ruth's textiles as a point of departure for her new student work. And on the back is like an idea for a screen that one of her students had that was inspired by her Bell's textile. What about her role as witness? Again, she has been an invaluable witness to the turbulent and triumphant events of the last century, which makes her a daunting yet inspiring subject for a 1-hour lecture, which is why I'm going just a little bit over. I'll conclude by talking about Ruth's work in Detroit, which is currently experiencing the economic and cultural revival that Ruth and Eddie both predicted so many decades ago. In recent years, Ruth has leveraged her considerable personal charisma and her status as a Detroit design icon, both to share her knowledge of the mid-century period, but also to support projects relating to mid-century modern architecture. In 2018, I was lucky enough to go to Palm Springs, California with Ruth to help her give a lecture on her life and career. And this was a lot of fun. Susan Skarsgård, who was the manager of the design archive at GM, was one of the organizers, and Jerry Kavanaugh is another designer who also worked in Detroit and then moved to California. She also was an integral part of the team that helped to save the Grosse Pointe Library. I don't know if you're familiar with this, designed by Marcel Breuer. They were thinking of demolishing it and putting up one of those new modern generic, like everyone else has, libraries. And thankfully, Ruth was able to tell them about the significance, not only of the library, but of the Calder mobile that they were about ready to just toss out because they didn't know what it was. So they also worked very closely with Rob and Mary Lubera, who had purchased and were restoring this Alexander Gerard home in Grosse Pointe, of all places. So it's a perfectly intact home from 1950. And here's the interior. And here is Ruth. This is one of the first photos that I shot of Ruth with the owners, Rob and Mary Lubera, in their atrium. And I remember she's kind of like, why am I taking this picture? But became great friends. And here's a wonderful picture that we took actually a week before she moved to Colorado Springs with her daughter, Anita, and her son, Jeremy, and her son, Danny. So she has been instrumental in, really trying to save and preserve the legacy of the mid-century period. When asked how she feels about the current uber popularity of mid-century modern, she responds, "I'm happy that I've lived long enough to witness it, but that there should be more emphasis on its history and preservation." She also adds, "I wish that Eddie were here to see it." Eddie remains an inspiration in Ruth's life. In fact, she still treasures the spools of thread in her wicker sewing basket, which were one of Eddie's first gifts to her. While Ruth was initially disappointed by the gift, her mother had explained, "He gave them to you because he loves you and he loves your sense of color." It was at that moment that Ruth realized she had found the love of her life. She still has those spools of thread, every color that Eddie could get his hands on. One could say that these old and new threads have coalesced over time into a beautiful tapestry. Better yet to say that while Ruth's life and career has not always been a rose garden, she has without a doubt created the beautiful bouquet of flowers that her mother envisioned all those years ago. Thank you. So I added, and here's that threads image, and then again, the two images of Eddie and Ruth and her mother. But I added a few things, that quotes that people had sent in to share reminiscences of the store. I actually I can read a couple of them, and I don't know if anyone here has any remembrances. I think there's one person who does. But here's the head of the fiber and textiles at CCS, who was saying how he was inspired early on by the modern aesthetic of her designs. A couple of people saying how they used to shop at the Adler Schnee store on Livernois and 7 Mile. And then when they moved to downtown Detroit, I still have a furniture piece, fantastic design. So a lot of people would say when we did some of the lectures, people came up and said that they came with things, they brought things in and they said, I had my wedding registry at Adler Schnee and I still have, and I'm still using these things. I mean, how many people can say that of things that we buy today, right? That'll still be around in 50 years. So far ahead of the other retailers, there was no place like her store. I love this quote. Someone said, I almost had to have a separate budget for these beautiful contemporary items because he had an office across the street in Harmony Park. So I don't know, does anybody have anything that they remember going in the store? I think somebody who was here, who was it that you have a textile that your mother bought, right? At the Adler Schnee store?
Right.
Yeah, that you would like to find out more about. So what I can do is, it's probably not a good time now, but I can send that picture to Ruth and Danny and maybe see if she remembers anything about that. Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, she is on. Let me see if I can, let's see. Let me step over this. Let's see. Yeah, she's still on. So let's see.
We're sending waves of love.
Yes. Yeah, so we're definitely so appreciative, Danny, for having Ruth on tonight. I don't know if there's anything. I see something in the chat. Let's see. Oh, someone says, can you move the camera over? We can't see you. Oops. Now you can see me. Yeah. Just if anyone has any questions though, and even on the chat, and I don't know, Danny, if you have anything to share from Ruth or not, that's totally fine if you don't. But again, we're very sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for your presentation. We've been watching, but Ruth has had a very long day.
Yeah.
So gonna need to sign off.
Yes, no problem. But we'll just say a very belated happy birthday to Ruth, and we're so grateful for you being on tonight.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you, Ruth. Great. Thank you all.
So did anybody have any questions?
Yeah, if you have any questions, I could definitely try to field some of them too. Yes, go ahead.
Why did they come to Detroit from Germany?
I have to look and see what year that was. I think that was in my presentation. Yeah, I think that was it. Yep.
Family here or?
Not in Detroit, no. Yeah, so they pretty much had to start over, and I know that Ruth's father had a very hard time. It was very hard for anyone, coming from Germany to get work. And I think he worked in he was very highly educated. I mean, he was I'm trying to remember if he was on he worked for ThyssenKrupp, and I think it was in, legal, issues and things like that at the highest level. And I think he was working garden store or something like that. I mean, they did pretty much anything that they could to, keep going. Yeah. Yes, go ahead. Oh, good.
I was growing up at that time. And, there were a number of students in Berkeley Central High School that come Jewish families in the community, Jewish community, opened up their own for those people.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, please.
Did any of her siblings or children go into the design work at all?
They're all I think they're all lawyers. Yeah, so I think they witnessed firsthand what it was like to be this, I mean, they were so dedicated to design. I mean, they wouldn't compromise. They didn't want to change, the business. They just wanted to, even though things weren't selling and people weren't coming around to modern design, I mean, they just kept doing it because they just wouldn't do anything else. And they were so dedicated to it. And I think the kids were like, wow, I'm not doing that, but they're all obviously very supportive of her design career now. And Danny has been so great. I mean, he got her to the Cranbrook exhibition and obviously got her here tonight. So they're so supportive of her legacy and really trying to make sure that her legacy is getting out there in the proper channels. So, but yeah.
Did you ever happen to see, I heard Ruth years ago at Cranbrook. I think she spoke an hour and a half. It was fabulous. She talked about everybody that she knew, everything.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine who was a videographer did a small interview with a man who was a doctor. Actually, he was one of my allergists.
Oh,
And he had a house in maybe West Bloomfield somewhere. And it was all the interior. The whole house was done by Ruth.
do you remember the name?
Yeah, it'd take me a second to think about
Yeah,
it.
if you think of it, let me know. Yeah, because
Yeah, I'll have to.
yeah,
think
because
about it.
she
It's been
designed, I
years.
mean, every place we would go, people would come up and say, you designed my parents' house, you designed my house. And we actually went like in, the Lafayette Park. There are quite a few
Yeah,
people
I had
who had
friends.
had, their homes designed by her. So,
Yeah, there was a woman attorney that I know. She's probably close to the same age as Ruth. Her name was Barbara Robb.
okay,
And she lived in Lafayette.
yeah,
It was Cutler was the man's last name.
okay, okay. I'll
And
have to look
David
that up.
Mayer was the one that did the video.
Okay, oh, that's interesting. I'll have to write that down. David Mayer.
I'll give you his address.
Okay, great, yeah.
Barbara, did you have another question?
Comments at all about practicing Judaism and did she belong to synagogue here? Did she active at all in that area?
That's a really good question. I know that she was very involved in terms of doing lectures and in that sense. Religiously, in terms of worship, I'm not sure about that. I don't know if you have, oh, yeah, they are still on. Yeah. Don't know. Yeah.
Sorry, we
yeah.
are still here. What
Oh,
was-
yeah. You were
what
just wondering, about, because I know that Ruth was involved with, a lot of Jewish organizations doing lectures and, being involved. But in terms of worship and like being part of affiliation with the synagogue here.
Well, we certainly were always affiliated with the synagogue, but Ruth and Eddie were not much for organized religion. I think Ruth's main religious connection was with the design that is found in the natural world. And I think
Yes.
that's the most that's the connection that she had.
Feels
Although
really bad.
certainly from a cultural perspective, we always strongly identify as Jews, and in part probably because of the experience of the Holocaust.
Yes. Great, thank you. Yeah, so I think what he was saying is, that kind of cultural, historical, personal experiences would definitely steeled her. I mean, were just ingrained in her from day one.
I should also say that one of the great frustrations that Ruth has being in Colorado Springs is the lack of a Jewish community here that's rivals what was in Detroit. Because certainly Ruth grew up and spent her life in the Jewish community of Detroit. Many of the clients and customers were from the Jewish community as well.
Interesting.
Please tell her that Jerry Klein sends his love. He was a customer at Earl Ford Earl Design Company. And he wanted to be here, but he couldn't.
Thank you. I'll certainly do that.
Yeah, and tell her that we're definitely missing her in Detroit. That is for sure.
She's missing us, we're missing her.
Yes, we're missing each other. That's for sure.
Yeah, she if she could, she would go back tomorrow.
Yeah,
Yesterday.
yesterday. Yeah, that's right.
Well, I
Yeah,
hate to close
Yes,
this meeting, but
yeah.
it's been so interesting, and
Yes,
I think
thank
it
you.
shows what varieties we have of history programs in this community. To go from the sublime to the ridiculous. On June 30th, we're going to have a program on soupy sales. I
Oh,
welcome
that's
you
great.
to attend. It'll be at the Jewish Center at the Berman Theater. And it's at 7 o'clock, and I don't exactly know where it's going to go, so you'll have to go
Yeah.
check it out and find out. That will be one of the June programs. And I welcome all of you to, if you are not members of JHSM, we love to have you. We need you and we want you, and you will benefit by knowing what kinds of program we have, and by receiving an award-winning journal. The price is right. There's membership material over there. I want to thank you, Debbie. I think that this lecture tonight showed your breadth of art history experience and also your love of Ruth. And what a lovely combination to get the scholarship and the affection. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, terrific, terrific. Thank you all for coming.